Hello everybody. Today I am going to make a video and teach you guys how I make my sandwich bread. It is not very hard, but there is a process that you use, so I'm going to teach you what I do today. First off, you need these ingredients. Sugar. I use a C&H sugar because it's supposed to be specific lots are supposed to be bone char free for people who have Alpha-Gal, so this is supposed to be safe. I use two different types of flour. I use the whole wheat that is white premium flour. I mainly use the King Arthur all-purpose flour. I will use light tasting olive oil, and I will use salt and water. So first what you do is you warm up your water. You need 2 cups of water. This is 1 cup. I've already warmed it up and it is pretty hot. The way I do it is I put in the water first. When I have already extra hot water, which is I did 1 minute in the microwave, then I just do room temperature for the other cup. So therefore it ends up being just warm, which is what you need for the yeast. So here's my 2nd cup of water. I'm going to put in my bread machine pan, which I have right here. Next up is you put in sugar. You need 4 tablespoons of sugar. So you put sugar in the water. So whenever you measure sugar, you shake it off and you just get 1 level tablespoon. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. The next is you need 4 tablespoons of olive oil. I use this olive oil right here. I've actually got it poured into my handy dandy container. This is the one that's easier to pour out of. So I'm going to put 4 tablespoons of olive oil in right on top in the water. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Put this in the sink, so I'm done with the tablespoon. The next thing we are going to do in a bread maker, you always add the liquid ingredients, and then you add your flour, then you add the solids, the other stuff after that. So next I'm going to do flour. There is different ratios you can do of your flour for bread. If you're used to white bread, you're going to want to do mainly the all-purpose flour from King Arthur. If you're used to more wheat bread, add in a bigger amount of this other wheat flour. What I usually do, you need 5 cups total. If you do at least 4 cups of the white all-purpose flour and 1 cup of that, it works out perfect. It's kind of like a white bread and it's not terribly crummy. If you do all-purpose flour, you need to add some gluten flour so it isn't too crummy. So I don't like to do that because that's just an extra step. So doing this is actually healthier for you because this has the fiber. Right now I'm going to do 2 cups of the wheat bread and 3 cups of the King Arthur all-purpose flour, and that's a pretty good mixture. So I'm going to calculate 3 cups. I know you're supposed to pour flour into a cup, but what I do is I fluff up the flour, and then I just pick up the flour that's been fluffed up out of the bag. Seems to work pretty good. It doesn't need to be exact because when you're making bread, you sometimes will have to add extra when you are making the loaves itself. So it seems to be okay. I've always done it and it seems to work pretty great. So there's a half, and there's 1. 1 1/2. 2, 2 1/2, 3. So there's 3 of that. So I'm going to put 2 cups of this other flour in to make a total of 5. So again, put the bag sideways, fluff up all your flour, and then scoop it up a little bit and kind of even it off a little bit, and that works. So 1 1/2, 1, that is all the flour. I usually just leave my half of measuring cup in my flour because that's what I need it for. Excuse me. Okay, so let me wash my hands real quick. So next up, we need to put in the salt and the yeast. The salt always needs to be separate from the yeast. So I always put the salt around the edges of the container, and then you make a little well and like an indentation in the middle, and that's where you put your yeast. So I need 2 teaspoons of salt. This is a half teaspoon. So 1/2, 1, 1.5, and 2. Next, we'll need the yeast. Let me get that out of my refrigerator. Okay, this is the yeast I use. It's a big container I get off Amazon. I just pour some out into this, and then I smush this back up and put it in the freezer. And every time I run out of here, I take it out of the freezer and fill it back up. It works out pretty good. I'll put this back in this freezer. So now you need 4 teaspoons of yeast. So I have my stuff all mixed up in here. You can't really see it, but I'm going to make a well right here in the middle that they can kind of set in. So I'm going to put 4 teaspoons, so I got a teaspoon measure here, of yeast. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now I'm going to put this in my bread maker. I'm going to set it on the bread making setting, or the bread dough setting is what I set it on actually. And once I set it on the bread dough setting, this will end up making 2 normal size loaves of bread. And so if you let it rise the whole entire hour and a half that my thing says, it'll overflow. So about 45 minutes, check on it, and then we will come back, and once it has been risen, it has sat there and has been risen to almost the top, then we will work on getting it out, rolling it, putting it in the loaf pans, and actually cooking it in my stove. I don't ever cook the bread in a bread maker. I only use the bread maker to make the dough. So I will see you here in a minute. Hello, I am back, and for a minute my bread is almost done rising for the first rise. I'm going to show you how I'm going to prepare the bread. What we do is I only use the bread maker to make the dough. I do not like the shape that it cooks. I don't like how it cooks, so I cook it in my actual oven. I have 2 loaf pans here. I just found these at garage sales. They're just a normal, about 8 inches long, 2-ish inches tall, 2.5 inches tall, and that is what I am going to use. I've got 2 loaf pans. So I'm going to move the camera a little bit down so you can see. We are going to put parchment paper in line the bread loaf pans. I am going to show you the easiest way I have found. First, you cut your paper. It's probably a little over a 1.5 maybe. Kind of eyeball it. I'll show you what I mean by eyeballing in here in a second. So I've got it cut. Now we've got this. Sometimes if you turn it over, it makes it a little bit easier because it doesn't fold up on you. So you set your pan right there in the middle of it. When you lift it up, it should be a couple inches on top of the loaf pan, because whenever your loaf rises, if you don't have your parchment paper, it kind of pops out over the edge, and that's not very pretty, and that's not very good. That's not really what a sandwich loaf looks like. So you set your loaf pan on there. Easiest way is to cut 4 slits right by the edges of your pan. Once you get your slits in there, you have to make them a tiny bit skinnier than what you actually can put your thing in there because it's got to go inside. So you fold your long side over, make a crease on each side. Do that on the other side. Fold in your ends. And then you're able to grab these two middle pieces, take the ends, wrap them around, take the ends of the other side, wrap it around, and set it in your loaf pan. So therefore, it fits just perfectly like that and ready for your bread. Now we are going to do that with the second one. I'll show you one more time just so that way you can see what I do. Again, just kind of eyeballing it. Slice it up straight across. Parchment paper back down. Turn it over so it's easier to set. We are going to put the pan on the parchment paper, lift it up, see if it's about even. Yes, it seems to be about even. Make sure it's about even on the edges too. Slice straight through like this, straight through like that. You will see I move the pan over a tiny bit once I do it before I do the other side, because that way I can get it small enough that it still fits in the base, because the pan itself is, you know, I don't know, a couple millimeters thick. So if you do it exactly on the outside, it's going to be too fat. And it still works. You just go back and cut it again to make it fit in there better. Or just squish it in there, whatever works for you. Works pretty good. Fold this in half all up on the sides. Get your pan ready. First, lift up the two long sides and fold over the ends. Lift that up, fold over the ends, and stick it in the pan. This one is a little more angled on the sides, so therefore these kind of stick out a little bit more, but you'll see it still works out just fine, especially once you get the bread in there. It works perfect. So now I've got two pans ready. The other thing I've got to get ready is, I'll put this scissors up real quick. Move this up again, okay. Other thing you got to get ready is your surface of where you're going to roll out your bread. I had this handy dandy mat. You just roll it out. Has the, you know, different shapes on it. And I have my rolling pin. So now I am all ready. The next thing you need to get ready is the oven. I do, because these are taller, I put my racks down lower in the oven. So therefore they don't, the parchment paper and stuff doesn't get too hot on the very top of it. So I will move the oven rack down, and I will be back in just 1 second once I get the bread done. Hang on, I'll see you in a second. Okay, I am back. It has been about 45 minutes, and our bread now, the dough has risen to about this point. If I go any further, it's going to go over a flow and not be a good deal. So make sure you always check it before it's actually done, because we've got so much bread dough in here. This one's a smaller one, so we don't want it to overflow. What I did is I have turned on my oven to the lowest setting it will go, which for me is 170. So I'm going to let that warm, so I have a place to let my dough rise an extra time. So we need to first get it out of the pan. Let me skip the camera down a little bit so that you can see what I am doing. There. So I'm going to get it out of the pan. Sometimes this little spatula works good so you don't get it all over your hands. And just flip it out over here onto your mat or your prepared surface that you are going to use. Dumped it out there. I have the paddle in here. Make sure I always get that out. Sometimes you want to get the bread off of that. Some of the stuff there, sometimes will always be kind of black just because of the makings of the way it is. So sometimes leave that on there. So now you've got it flipped over here. Now we need to knead it to get some of the big air bubbles out. So you take corners and you flip them over the edge, kind of like that. It's depending on how much water you put in there and how much flour you put in there. Sometimes it's kind of sticky. Once you knead it more, it doesn't get quite as sticky. But the goal is to get the air out of it again so you can have a second rise. Let me put the camera down a little bit more. So here I've got it as a big old chunk of dough. Kind of flop it around, make it a ball that's pretty even. Because first off, we have to make it into 2 loaves. So stick it right in the middle of my circle is what I figured out. Make sure where the line is, that is right in the middle. I can use the number 11, which is the center, to cut it in half. I have my, I don't know what you call this, but it's pretty handy for doing this. So you put it on the 11 and you smush it down and cut your dough in half. I'm going to take half of this and just move it to the side. I usually just put it back in my pan so it kind of is out of the way. Now, I'm going to make this into its own circle and not that weird shape of cutting it in half, and set it down. The best way to do this is we're going to make this a rectangle. And so to do a rectangle, when you have a ball of dough, you kind of smush it down this way, pick it up, smush it down this way, and once you got it like that, then you roll out each corner, and that gets, I don't know if you can hear it, see if you can hear that. You get the air bubbles out. And it also makes it more rectangular shape when you are rolling the dough out. So I'm going to work on rolling this dough out for a second. It's actually going very well. If you kind of want it to be a rectangle, but ignore that for a second and roll it out. At the very end right here, go ahead and push that and you can hear all these air bubbles come out. See, that's what you want to do. You want all those air bubbles out, or else you'll have huge air bubbles in your final product. Once you get all those air bubbles out, you can kind of lift up your dough and squish it back into that rectangular shape that we are wanting. So then roll it again. That's pretty good. Let's do this. I see a bubble. Open up that bubble. And there we go. Okay, so now it's pretty rectangular. Now I'm going to roll it up. So you start the tighter you roll it, the better, because if you get air bubbles in it when you roll it, then you have big air bubbles in your final loaf of bread. So that's where if you do stickier dough, it's harder to work with, but it actually is better because it'll all stick together better and you'll have less air bubbles. So now I've got it. Looks like a pretty good little dough. I'm going to take my pan I have right here and stick it in my pan. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the second one, and then I will put them in the oven and let them rise. I go ahead and turn off the oven once it's gotten warm, and I let it rise for 30 more minutes. Set your timer for 30 minutes. And then once the 30 minutes have done, then you turn on your oven. I've got an old oven that slowly gets warm, so I leave them in my oven and turn it on to 350 degrees. Let it then start cooking for 34 minutes, and then I will come back and I will show you the finished product, but I'll also show you the product in between when I first start to turn on the oven. I'll see you in a second. Okay, I am back. It has been 30 minutes. I am about to turn on the oven to bake and put it at 350 and set my timer for 34 minutes. I will show you what my bread looks like. Here we go. There is my bread. It looks about like it's supposed to. It's still going to rise a little bit more in the 34 minutes while it's cooking, but that's what it looks like, and we will be back here in 34 minutes to show you the final product. Bye. Okay, we are back. My bread is cooked, and I'm going to show you what it looks like now. I took it out of the oven about 5 minutes ago. That is very important. If you take it out of the oven, do not immediately take it out of the pan. Give it about 5 minutes. If you give longer, it's going to sweat. If you do it faster, it's going to kind of fall down and squish. I found that out. So here's what my bread looks like. Here is where I'm going to take it out. I can then move the pan out of the way. The pan's still pretty hot, so I'm not touching it. And you open it up, and there's the bread. I'm going to move it over to a wire rack right over here. And take it out, put it on my rack, and open it up. I'm going to leave it like this until it basically cools. Here in about 30 minutes, when it's cooler, I will take the parchment paper off so the bottom doesn't sweat. Once it is completely cooled, then I have some bags, plastic bags that I just got at Walmart for sandwiches. I will put them in there, store it in the refrigerator. You can put it in the refrigerator. Once it is cold, that's when you cut your bread. And the other one I will put in the freezer, and it will last until you take it out. If you need it the next day, you take it out that night, and then it is thawed out, and then you cut it the next day and then start eating it. So that is what I do. I do have a bread. This is how I cut my bread. It is a Deli Pro knife. It has this little guide, so you can cut it very good. I always set mine on the 1/2 inch setting, and then you end up having very nice even slices. So it makes wonderful for sandwich bread, for toast, or anything like that. That's how I make my bread, and thank you for listening to me.